Captain Aidan Walker stood at the back of the Grand Hall, watching the council meeting unfold. His eyes narrowed as he listened to the debates around him. This was the heart of the galaxy, where decisions were made for entire star systems. The members of the Galactic Council, seated in their elegant chairs, were discussing the fate of a peaceful alien race called the Thyrans. The Thyrans had sent out a distress signal weeks ago, asking for help as their planet, Valera, was being invaded by the Draxans, a ruthless and powerful species. But despite the urgency in the Thyrans' message, the council members remained indifferent. One by one, they took turns speaking, each offering reasons for why the Thyrans should be left to their fate. "It's too risky," said a representative from the Valera species. "The Draxans are too powerful. Our fleets would be decimated." Another council member, a woman from the Kryn system, nodded in agreement. "And what do we gain from helping them? Their planet holds no strategic value. There's nothing to be gained here." Aidan could feel his blood boil. He had seen many things in his career, but this was different. This wasn't just a debate about politics or war. This was about people, real, living beings who were depending on someone to help them. The Thyrans weren't warriors. They were a peaceful species, known for their wisdom and kindness. But kindness alone couldn't stop the Draxans. Aidan clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the decision hanging in the air. "We cannot afford to anger the Draxans," the council president, a tall and imposing figure from the Talarian sector, finally said. "Our galaxy is already stretched thin with conflicts on other fronts. We do not have the resources to protect a race with no military strength." Aidan's heart sank as the words were spoken. The council had already decided. The Thyrans were on their own. The plea for help was being ignored. The meeting continued, but Aidan could hardly focus on the words. His mind raced with thoughts of the Thyrans, their planet burning in the distance, helpless against the Draxan invasion. He couldn't just walk away from this. He had spent years working within the system, but today he saw it for what it truly was, a system that turned its back on those who needed help the most. He glanced around the room, noticing that none of the members seemed particularly concerned. The weight of their decision didn't seem to affect them at all. Aidan had always believed in the idea of the galaxy working together, that despite the many differences between species, there was power in unity. But now, that belief felt hollow. He had a duty to the Thyrans, and he wasn't going to let them down. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. All eyes turned toward him, surprised by the sudden motion. Aidan took a deep breath and spoke. "I don't agree with this decision," he said, his voice firm and calm. "The Thyrans are in danger. They've asked for help, and we have the means to provide it. We may not have a fleet as powerful as the Draxans, but we have something they don't: human ingenuity, adaptability, and the will to fight for what's right." The room fell silent. Some members exchanged uneasy glances. The council president's stern gaze locked onto Aidan. "Captain Walker, your opinion is noted, but the decision has already been made. The council has voted, and the Thyrans will receive no help," the president said coldly. Aidan's heart raced, but he didn't back down. "I'm sorry, but I can't accept that." He turned on his heel and walked toward the exit. "I'll do what I can to help the Thyrans, with or without the council's support." The door shut behind him with a quiet thud, leaving the room in stunned silence. Outside the council chambers, Aidan stepped into the hallway. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of his decision. He knew what he was about to do would likely cost him his career, maybe even his reputation. But some things were more important than politics or personal gain. The Thyrans needed help, and Aidan knew that if no one else would stand up for them, then it had to be him. A quick call to his fleet was all it took to set his plan into motion. With the help of a few trusted allies back on Earth, Aidan began to gather a team. He knew that the mission would be dangerous. The Draxans were ruthless and powerful, and they would stop at nothing to crush any resistance. But Aidan had seen firsthand what humans were capable of. They had fought battles across countless worlds, overcome impossible odds, and survived against all expectations. And now, it was time to prove it again. The galaxy might have turned its back on the Thyrans, but humanity wasn't about to let them fall without a fight. Captain Aiden Walker sat at his desk, staring at the blinking lights on his computer screen. He had made the decision to help the Thyrans, but now he faced a new challenge: convincing others to join him. He knew he couldn't do this alone. The Draxans were too strong, and the Thyrans' planet was too far from Earth to launch a successful rescue without help. Aiden leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face with his hands. He had been thinking about this for days, considering every possible angle. He needed a crew, a fleet, and most importantly, allies. People who still believed in helping others, even when it was dangerous. He picked up the communicator and pressed a button to connect with his closest friend, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes. Sarah had served with him for years, and he knew she was someone who could be counted on when things got tough. The screen flickered, and Sarah's face appeared. Her short, dark hair and steady expression gave Aiden a sense of calm. "Captain, what's the situation?" she asked, already knowing that whatever it was, it wouldn't be easy. Aiden took a deep breath. The Council turned their back on the Thyrans. They've refused to help. I'm putting together a mission to save them, and I need your help. Sarah's eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. "You know I'm with you. What do you need me to do?" "I need a crew," Aiden said, his voice steady but determined. "I need soldiers, engineers, medics, anyone who's willing to fight. This mission is going to be dangerous. We might not even make it back." "I'll put out the call," Sarah replied without hesitation. "If you're going, I'm going. And I'll make sure we have the best team for the job." Aiden smiled faintly. He was grateful for Sarah's loyalty. But there was still a bigger problem ahead: the fleet. A rescue operation of this scale would need ships, supplies, and resources, things that would be hard to come by without support from the Council. The resources they had were limited, and every ship that joined the mission would need to be prepared to face the full force of the Draxan military. The next few hours were a blur of calls, messages, and planning. Aiden reached out to old contacts, former military officers, and even engineers who owed him favors. Slowly but surely, his crew began to form. The more he spoke about the Thyrans and their need for help, the more people stepped forward, offering their skills and expertise. Aiden didn't care about their reasons for joining. Some came for honor, others for adventure, and some simply because they couldn't stand to see innocent lives destroyed. But whatever their reasons, they were all driven by a single purpose: to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The mission was coming together, piece by piece. A group of ships, each equipped with enough firepower to challenge the Draxan forces, was being assembled. Engineers worked tirelessly, retrofitting the ships with makeshift weapons and defensive systems. A medical team was formed, ready to provide aid to the Thyrans once they reached the planet. Aiden even recruited a few specialists in alien languages, understanding that communication would be key when they arrived on Valera. Even with the progress, Aiden knew there were still many hurdles to overcome. The Draxans were ruthless and would likely be waiting for them. But something about the mission felt right to him. He felt that they were doing more than just fighting an enemy. They were fighting for a principle, a belief that the galaxy should stand together, that no one, no matter how small or weak, should be left to suffer alone. That evening, after finalizing the crew list, Aiden stood on the deck of his ship, staring out at the stars. The distant planet of Valera was far from his mind, but the people on it, those who had been forgotten by the galaxy, were never far from his thoughts. He knew the danger they faced, but he also knew that this was what they had been trained for. This was what humanity was capable of when it stood united. The ships were ready to depart, but before they did, Aiden needed to speak to the crew. He needed them to understand the importance of this mission, to understand that they weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting for something much bigger. The meeting was held in the main hall of the ship, a large, open space where everyone could gather. Aiden stood at the front, his face serious, but his voice strong. "Everyone," he began, his voice echoing across the room. "We're about to face an enemy unlike anything we've ever fought before. The Draxans are powerful, and they will stop at nothing to destroy us. But we're not doing this for glory. We're doing this because the Thyrans need us. The galaxy has turned its back on them, but we will not. We will show the universe that humanity is not afraid to stand up for what is right." There was a brief silence as the crew absorbed his words. Then, one by one, they nodded in agreement. Aiden could see it in their eyes, the same determination that had driven humanity to survive against all odds. They were ready. The countdown began. In just a few hours, the human fleet would leave for Valera, and the galaxy would soon know that when the rest of the universe turned its back, humanity would be the one to fight. The engines of the fleet hummed steadily as they soared through the vast emptiness of space. Captain Aiden Walker stood at the helm of the lead ship, his hands resting lightly on the controls. Behind him, his crew worked with quiet focus, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. They had been on their way to Valera for days now, and the journey had been uneventful so far. But Aiden knew that this calm before the storm would not last. The Draxans were out there, and they would not let anyone stand in their way. As they neared the Thyrans' home planet, the mood aboard the ships grew more serious. The crew members exchanged glances, some whispering to each other, others lost in their thoughts. They all knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a mission. It was a chance to prove that humanity was more than just a collection of people. It was a chance to show that they could be the protectors, the defenders of the helpless. "We're getting close, Captain," Sarah Hayes, the ship's second-in-command, said from the communications panel. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "We'll be in orbit around Valera in less than an hour." Aiden nodded, trying to keep his mind sharp. "All right. Prepare for the worst. I don't expect the Draxans to just let us land unchallenged." As he spoke, a warning light began to flash on the control panel. His eyes snapped to it. "What is it?" "Draxan ships, Captain," came the response from his radar officer. "They've detected us. They're closing in fast." Aiden's heart skipped a beat. The Draxans had found them sooner than expected. He knew that they were in for a fight, but he had hoped for just a little more time to get to the surface. "Hold steady," Aiden ordered, his voice calm but firm. "I want all defensive shields up, and weapons ready. We're not turning back now." The fleet of human ships formed a tight formation, with Aiden's ship at the center. The ships of the Draxans were closing in fast, their dark, imposing shapes cutting through the darkness of space. Their ships were larger, more powerful, and they had the advantage of numbers. But humanity had something that the Draxans didn't: determination. As the first shots rang out, Aiden felt a surge of adrenaline. The fleet was in combat now, and there was no turning back. The Draxans fired powerful energy beams, lighting up the dark expanse of space. Aiden's ship rocked with the force of a direct hit, but the shields held firm. The fleet returned fire, the human ships unleashing a barrage of laser blasts that lit up the stars around them. "Hold your ground," Aiden shouted over the comms as he steadied the ship. "We're not backing down. Keep firing." The battle raged on. The Draxan ships were relentless, but Aiden and his crew fought with everything they had. Each blast from the Draxan fleet was met with a well-aimed return from the human ships. Aiden's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus. The Thyrans were counting on them, and they couldn't afford to fail. On the surface of Valera, the Thyrans watched helplessly as the sky was filled with explosions. From their cities and villages, they could see the distant battle taking place above their planet. The Thyrans had never been warriors. They had always lived peacefully, focusing on their culture, their art, and their knowledge. They had never imagined that one day they would need someone to protect them. But now, as they saw the flashes in the sky, they realized how close they had come to losing everything. Inside the main control room of one of the human ships, Sarah's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we've got an opening. The Draxans are distracted by the fight. We can break through their line and land on the surface." Aiden didn't hesitate. "Do it. Prepare to land." The fleet pushed forward, breaking through the Draxan line. The human ships surged toward the surface of the Lyra, dodging blasts and weaving through the chaos of the battle. Aiden's eyes were locked on the approaching ground. They had made it past the Draxans, but the real danger was still ahead. As they descended, Aiden's thoughts were with the Thyrans. They had been left to face the Draxans alone for far too long. Now, humanity had come to help, but would it be enough? Would they be able to defend the Thyrans and drive the Draxans away? The ground rushed toward them. With a heavy thud, the ship touched down, its landing gear crunching into the rocky soil of the Lyra. Aiden's breath came in quick bursts as he stood up, his boots hitting the floor of the ship with purpose. The door opened, and he stepped out, followed by his team. The scene before them was like something out of a nightmare. The Draxans had begun their assault on the cities, and fires burned in the distance. But Aiden and his crew weren't here to watch. They were here to fight. "We need to get to the Thyrans, fast," Aiden said, his voice low but filled with determination. "We can't let the Draxans destroy everything." With their weapons ready, the human soldiers advanced, ready to face whatever the Draxans threw at them. They had come here to protect a species that had been abandoned by the galaxy, and they weren't going to let them down. The human crew quickly exited their ships and moved into the heart of the battlefield. The sound of explosions echoed in the distance, and the sky above was filled with the smoke of burning buildings. The Draxans had arrived with overwhelming force, and the once peaceful planet of the Lyra was now a war zone. Captain Aiden Walker's boots thudded against the ground as he led the charge, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of the Thyrans. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. They had come here to help, to defend the helpless. But he knew that the odds were stacked against them. The Draxans were ruthless, and they wouldn't stop until they had destroyed everything. Sarah Hayes, his trusted lieutenant, walked beside him, her expression focused. "We've got to move quickly," she said. "The Draxans won't wait for us to get organized." Aiden nodded. "Agreed. We need to find the Thyrans, get them to safety, and then we can deal with the Draxans." The human soldiers moved quickly, taking cover behind rocks and buildings as they made their way through the ruined city. The Thyrans had already started to evacuate, but they were no match for the Draxans. Their planet was not built for war, and they had no way of defending themselves. As Aiden moved forward, he could see the fear in the eyes of the Thyrans they encountered. They had never seen anything like this before. The peaceful race, known for their art and knowledge, had been thrust into a nightmare of violence and destruction. "Captain," a soldier called out from the front lines, "we found a group of Thyrans hiding in a shelter up ahead." Aiden's heart raced as he motioned for his team to move forward. The Thyrans had to be protected, and every second counted. The sooner they could get the civilians to safety, the better. They'd reached the shelter, and Aiden immediately stepped inside. The Thyrans were huddled together, their faces pale with fear. They looked up as Aiden and his team entered, their eyes wide with a mix of relief and confusion. "Don't be afraid," Aiden said in a calm, reassuring voice. "We're here to help you. We're going to get you to safety." The leader of the Thyrans, an older male with silver-gray skin, stepped forward. "You're human," he said slowly, his voice trembling. "You've come to save us." Aiden nodded. "We're not going to let the Draxans destroy your people. We're here to protect you." The Thyrans exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if they could trust the humans. But the look in Aiden's eyes was enough. They could see the sincerity and determination in his expression. Slowly, they began to rise to their feet, ready to follow. Just then, the sound of distant gunfire interrupted the moment of calm. Aiden's heart sank as he turned to face the door. The Draxans were getting closer. "We need to move now," Aiden shouted, motioning for the Thyrans to follow him. "Head for the ships." The group of Thyrans, though frightened, followed the humans without hesitation. The soldiers formed a protective perimeter around them, ensuring that the civilians were safe as they made their way through the crumbling streets. Every step felt like an eternity, the fear of being caught by the Draxans hanging over them like a dark cloud. The journey was perilous. The Draxans were relentless, and their forces seemed to be everywhere. But Aiden and his team fought back bravely, using every trick they had learned in years of combat. Their weapons blazed as they held off the Draxans, buying precious time for the Thyrans to escape. As they neared the edge of the city, Aiden could see the human ships waiting for them, their engines humming softly in the distance. The escape was almost within reach. But just as hope seemed within grasp, a loud roar filled the air. A massive Draxan warship descended from the sky, blocking the path to safety. Aiden's pulse quickened. The Draxans had sent reinforcements. It was now or never. "Get the Thyrans to the ships," Aiden ordered. "We'll hold them off." Without hesitation, his soldiers rushed forward, engaging the Draxans in a fierce firefight. Aiden stayed at the front, his mind focused on the mission. The Draxans had underestimated humanity before, but they wouldn't do so again. He would give everything to protect these innocent people. The battle raged on, as Aiden and his crew fought fiercely. The air was filled with the sound of laser blasts, the crackling of energy shields, and the screams of battle. Aiden's heart raced, but his mind was clear. He had made a promise to the Thyrans, and he wasn't about to break it. The Thyrans had reached the ships, their eyes wide with fear, but also filled with gratitude. They had never imagined that someone would come to their aid, let alone fight so fiercely for their survival. As Aiden's team fought to hold off the Draxans, he could hear the engines of the ships powering up. The Thyrans were safe. They had made it. But the battle was far from over. The air was thick with tension as the battle for Valera reached its peak. Aiden and his crew had managed to get the Thyrans to the safety of their ships, but they knew that this was far from over. The Draxans were relentless, and their warships hovered ominously in the sky, their weapons trained on the small human fleet below. Aiden stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the view screen. The Thyrans were aboard their ships, ready to leave the planet. But the human fleet was still under attack, and the Draxans were closing in. "We've bought them some time, but the Draxans won't give up," Sarah Hayes said, standing beside Aiden. "They'll be back in full force any minute." Aiden clenched his fists. "We're not letting them take this planet. Not after everything we've done." The situation was grim. The Draxans had numbers on their side, and their ships were bigger and more powerful. But Aiden knew one thing for sure. Humanity had the will to fight. They had proven it time and time again, and this time would be no different. They would fight until the very end. "Captain, we've got incoming," the radar officer called out. "Draxan ships, several dozen of them. They're coming in fast." Aiden's heart raced, but he didn't show it. He knew what had to be done. "Prepare for battle," he ordered. "All weapons online. Full shields. Let's show them what we're made of." The ship shook as the Draxans opened fire, their energy beams cutting through the dark sky. The human ships returned fire, sending a barrage of laser blasts toward the enemy. The sky erupted with explosions as both sides exchanged fire, the battle becoming a deadly dance of destruction. "Hold steady," Aiden shouted over the comms. "Don't let them push us back. We're fighting for Valera, for the Thyrans, for everything that's right." The human fleet fought with everything they had, their ships dodging and weaving through the firestorm of enemy blasts. The Draxans were fierce, but the humans had something the enemy didn't: the will to protect. As the battle raged on, Aiden's thoughts kept returning to the Thyrans. They had entrusted humanity with their survival, and he couldn't afford to let them down. Their planet was a beautiful one, filled with vibrant landscapes and rich history. To let the Draxans destroy it would be a crime against everything they stood for. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the lead Draxan ship, sending it spiraling into the void. A cheer erupted from the human fleet as the ship was torn apart. Aiden's eyes widened as he saw the familiar shape of one of the Thyran ships charging forward. They were here, and they had come to help. "Captain, we've got reinforcements," Sarah said, a note of surprise in her voice. "The Thyrans have armed their ships. They're joining the fight." Aiden couldn't believe his eyes. The Thyrans had never been warriors, but they had seen what humanity was capable of, and they had decided to stand by their side. It was a moment of pure unity, a bond between two species who had once been strangers. Now, they were allies, fighting together for a common cause. "We're not just fighting for survival," Aiden said, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "We're fighting for hope, for a future." With the Thyrans now on their side, the battle began to shift. The human fleet, now reinforced by the Thyran ships, fought back with renewed strength. The Draxans, who had once seemed unstoppable, were now struggling to hold their ground. The tide of the battle was slowly turning in their favor, but Aiden knew this fight wasn't over. There were still many Draxan ships out there, and the enemy was not one to surrender easily. The human fleet had to keep pushing, had to show the Draxans that they would never back down. The battle raged for hours, the stars above Valera a chaotic mix of flashing lights and fire. Aiden and his crew fought with every ounce of strength they had, determined to protect the Thyrans and their planet. But as the sun began to set, there was a shift in the battle. The Draxans began to retreat, their ships pulling back one by one. "Captain, they're retreating," the radar officer called out, disbelief in his voice. "The Draxans are pulling back." Aiden couldn't believe it. They had won. The Draxans had been driven away, and Valera was safe. The human fleet and the Thyrans had done the impossible. They had come together to defeat a common enemy, and now the planet was free. "We did it," Sarah said, a smile on her face. "We actually did it." Aiden allowed himself a small smile, but his thoughts were still with the Thyrans. They had saved their planet, but they had also created a bond that would last far beyond this battle. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were more than just survivors. They were protectors, willing to fight for those who could not defend themselves. As the human fleet and the Thyran ships soared through the skies, Aiden couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was more than just a victory. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when two species, once strangers, came together in the face of adversity. And as the stars above Valera began to shine once again, Aiden knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for humanity and the Thyrans, a chapter of hope, unity, and unbreakable bonds. The victory over the Draxans had left the planet of Valera breathing a sigh of relief. The once burning skies were now clear, and the land, though scared by battle, began to heal. The Thyrans, once helpless and fearful, were now standing side by side with the humans who had defended them. A new alliance had been formed, one forged in the fires of war, but built on something stronger: trust. Aiden Walker stood at the edge of a large gathering of Thyrans, watching them as they celebrated their freedom. Their laughter echoed through the streets, and their faces, once filled with fear, now glowed with hope. The humans had given them a chance at life, and the Thyrans would never forget it. But Aiden knew that the road ahead was still uncertain. While the Draxans had been pushed back for now, it was only a matter of time before they returned. Or worse, someone else might come after the Thyrans. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and the Thyrans had no real defenses of their own. "Captain," Sarah Hayes said as she approached, "we need to start thinking about the future. The Draxans are gone, but we can't leave the Thyrans unprotected." Aiden turned to her, his expression serious. "I know. We've done all we can to help them, but they need more than just protection. They need to be ready for whatever comes next." Sarah nodded, We'll need to train them, give them the resources they need to defend themselves. Aiden gazed out at the Thyrans. They were a peaceful people, known for their wisdom and creativity, but they had no experience with combat. Teaching them how to defend their world would take time, and the threats they might face wouldn't wait. We'll help them, Aiden said with determination. We'll train them, equip them, and make sure they're ready. We won't let them fall again. Sarah smiled. That's the human spirit, Captain. But even as they spoke, a new sense of urgency gripped Aiden. The Draxans had been powerful, but they were only one of many dangers lurking in the galaxy, and now, with the Thyrans safe, it was time to think about the bigger picture. The universe was vast, and humanity's place in it had just become far more complicated. Back on the human ships, preparations were already underway. The fleet was being reinforced, and Aiden and his crew began training the Thyrans. The first step was to teach them how to use basic weapons, simple blasters, energy shields, and basic tactics. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Thyrans were quick learners. They absorbed every lesson, watching carefully as the humans demonstrated. Some were hesitant, unsure of their own abilities, but as time passed, their confidence grew. They knew that if they were going to protect their people, they had to learn these skills. As the weeks passed, the relationship between the humans and the Thyrans deepened. They shared knowledge, exchanged ideas, and learned from one another. The Thyrans taught the humans about their culture, their art, and their history. In turn, the humans shared their own experiences, about the challenges they had faced and how they had learned to survive and fight. It was a unique bond, one that transcended the usual boundaries between species. The humans had come to Valera as protectors, but they were leaving as friends. However, not all was peaceful in the galaxy. Word of the humans' victory over the Draxans had spread quickly, and soon, other factions began to take notice. Some saw the humans' strength and bravery as a potential threat, while others, like the Thyrans, saw them as potential allies. In a small command room aboard the human flagship, Aiden stared at a holographic display of the galaxy. The map showed countless star systems, many of them unknown. Some were marked as dangerous, while others were simply unexplored. The universe was vast, and their victory over the Draxans had attracted attention. Some welcome, but some not. We can't be naive, Aiden said as he looked at Sarah and the rest of his crew. We've made an ally in the Thyrans, but there are other forces out there who won't be happy with our presence. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. Sarah nodded, her face serious. Agreed. We've proven that we can stand up to the Draxans, but there are more dangers lurking in the shadows. Aiden glanced back at the Thyrans, who were still in the midst of their celebrations. They had no idea what was coming. They had lived in peace for so long, they hadn't considered the dangers of the galaxy beyond their own borders. And now, with humanity's help, they had to prepare for the unknown. Let's make sure they're ready, Aiden said firmly. For their future, for ours. The decision was made. The Thyrans would not be alone in their fight. Humanity would stand by their side, but they would also help the Thyrans grow stronger. The first steps had been taken, and now it was time to see how far they could go. Together, they would face the challenges of the universe with courage and unity. As the human fleet prepared for the future, Aiden felt a sense of hope that he hadn't felt in a long time. The alliance between the humans and the Thyrans had only just begun, but already it had the potential to change the fate of the galaxy. The galaxy was vast, filled with endless stars, planets, and species, many of which humans had never encountered. But the events of the past few months had changed everything. Humanity had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could stand strong, defend those who needed help, and bring hope where there was none. The humans had helped the Thyrans, a once weak and vulnerable species, find strength and independence. Under Aiden Walker's leadership, the humans had not only defended them from the Draxans, but had also helped them rebuild their shattered world. What began as a mission to protect quickly turned into a lasting partnership, one that would shape the future of the galaxy. Aiden stood in front of the massive viewports aboard the human flagship, staring out into the endless expanse of space. His crew had worked tirelessly to ensure the Firans had everything they needed to defend themselves. The humans had shared their advanced technology, taught them combat skills, and helped them establish new defenses. The Firans had come a long way from the frightened people who had begged for help. Now, they were ready to stand on their own. But Aiden knew that the work was far from over. The galaxy was filled with dangers, and there would always be threats, both known and unknown. But the Firans were no longer alone. Humanity had made sure of that. "Captain," Sarah Hayes said as she entered the room, "the Firans are ready. They've established their own defenses, and they've even started training their own soldiers." Aiden nodded, a proud smile forming on his face. "I knew they could do it. They just needed a little push, some guidance." Sarah smiled back, though there was a hint of worry in her eyes. "What about the rest of the galaxy? There are still other dangers out there, and we've made some powerful enemies." Aiden turned back to the view, his expression thoughtful. "We've made allies too, Sarah. The Draxans weren't the only ones watching us. Other species saw what we did for the Firans, and they know that we're capable of standing up for those who can't defend themselves. We've created a new hope." The alliance between the humans and the Firans had sent a powerful message across the galaxy. It wasn't just about fighting back against the Draxans. It was about showing the galaxy that strength didn't come from violence alone. It came from unity, from standing together when everything seemed impossible. As Aiden and Sarah stood there, watching the stars, a transmission alert went off. It was from the Firans' homeworld. Aiden's eyes narrowed as he looked at the screen, where the image of the Firans' leader, Kaller, appeared. "Captain Walker." Kaller's voice was calm but full of gratitude. "I wanted to thank you and your people once again for everything you've done for us. Our world is healing, our people are growing stronger, and we are now ready to stand with you, as allies, in whatever comes next." Aiden's heart swelled with pride as he listened to Kaller's words. The Firans had truly become a part of humanity's extended family. "You've earned it, Kaller. You've shown strength when it was needed most. Now, together, we'll face whatever the galaxy has in store." Kaller nodded, and then his face grew more serious. "There are rumors, Captain, not just of other species watching us, but of a larger threat looming. Something darker. I know we're ready, but we must be cautious. The galaxy is never as peaceful as it seems." Aiden's brow furrowed. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it from Kaller made it all too real. "We've made enemies, Kaller, but we've made more allies. And we'll keep fighting, not just for the Firans, but for the future of the galaxy." The transmission ended, and Aiden stood still for a moment, contemplating Kaller's words. The galaxy was vast, and while the threat of the Draxans was over for now, there were always new challenges ahead. But humanity had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, and they would stand up for what was right. He turned to Sarah, who was looking at him with the same determination. "We've got work to do. It's not just about protecting the Firans anymore. It's about protecting everyone who needs help." Sarah nodded. The galaxy has been waiting for someone to show it that strength doesn't come from power or weapons. It comes from unity, from helping others. Aiden smiled. "And that's exactly what we'll do. We'll bring that unity to the galaxy, one ally at a time." As the human fleet prepared to set course for new adventures, new alliances, and new challenges, Aiden felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he also knew that humanity wasn't alone in this vast galaxy anymore. The Firans had become a symbol of hope, a living reminder that no matter how small or vulnerable a species might seem, they had the potential for greatness. And together, humans and Firans would show the galaxy that no one had to stand alone. The stars above sparkled brightly, like endless possibilities, and for the first time in a long while, Aiden Walker felt like the galaxy was a place full of hope.